Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. As always, I'm so grateful you're here. I have two announcements that I want to make from the start of this podcast today because they are about things that are coming up in the next few weeks that I would hate for you to miss. The first is that I cannot believe this, but we are just 2 episodes away from episode 300 of the Grace and Grit podcast. So this is no small thing. This has taken 8 years of almost weekly production. I say weekly, almost weekly, because we definitely took a couple of breaks. But all in all, this has been a very consistent endeavor. And I am so proud of the content that we have put out, the reframing that we have helped women do, and just ultimately making it this far. It feels awesome. So I want to celebrate, and I want you to help me celebrate. So starting next week, I am going to let you know what you can do to actually be eligible to win 3 free months inside of my Rumble and Rise community. So Rumble and Rise is my private community where I do a lot of deep work around behavior change, and I really help arm women with a lot of incredible skill sets for living in integrity with themselves. And I just cannot say enough good things about this community. It is such a joy to hold space for this community and to do the work in there that we do. So if you are someone who's been listening to this, but for whatever reason, you've been a little hesitant to make the investment, stay tuned because next week I'm going to give you an opportunity to do something that will make you eligible to win a 3-month free membership. The second thing I wanted to bring to your attention is that at the end of October 2022. Some of you may not listen to this until 2025, but in October of 2022, more specifically the 24th, I believe through the 28th of October, I am running the Consistency Code Crash Course, which is a 5-day course that I have run several years in a row that basically helps give women a framework for behavior change. So no matter what kind of change you want to make in your life, this sort of sequence of steps will help you to dig in and make progress in that area. So I'm really excited to run this crash course this year. It is going to be $29, but I also want you to know that after the crash course, if you decide that you want to join the Rumble and Rise community to keep up your practice, we will credit you the $29 towards your first month of membership. So pretty good deal. And honestly, for what you are getting in those 5 days, $29 is a pretty awesome price, in my opinion. So if you want to know more about this, you can definitely be on my email list. You can register for my email list by going to my website, but you can also, on October 5th, you can register for the Consistency Code Crash Course. You can do that by going to graceandgrit.com/crash course. And again, registration does not open until October 5th, but on October 5th, you will be able to register. So in preparation for this crash course, I thought it would be really fun to use the next few episodes of this podcast to do kind of a pre-game series in dedication to consistency. I know that consistency sounds so boring. And so like, okay, Courtney, tell me something I haven't done before, or tell me something I haven't heard before. But consistency doesn't have to be boring. In fact, quite honestly, I don't think it should be boring because to be consistent, you have to enjoy what you're doing. And over the next few episodes, I am going to give you a lot of tools and a lot of pivots in your thinking to help you get a lot more excited about the practice of consistency. So we're going to start this pre-game series with this episode today, which I am titling The Power Promise. Now, I've spoken a lot about integrity on this show because I'm a big believer that deep health is about honoring not just one part of who you are, but the wholeness of who you are. It's not about separating out one piece of yourself, but really addressing the wholeness of the human. So you are not just a body. You are also someone who experiences a lot of thoughts and a lot of emotions, and you're in relationships and you live in an environment. There's a lot of parts to you that need to be nurtured in order to optimize your health. And a lot of women come to work with me because they are in what I have long called integrity pain. Integrity pain is when you are showing up in your life in a way that is completely mismatched from how you want to be showing up or what you want for your life. So integrity pain is a very real kind of pain. It's a very real kind of discomfort. And if we can solve integrity pain, if we can lessen it, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, your health will improve. Now, integrity, let's just be clear about what that is. Integrity is the practice of being honest, trustworthy, and reliable, and showing a consistent and uncompromising adherence to strong values. So just highlighting that last part, adherence to strong values. To live in integrity, you have to know what's important to you. You have to know what lights you up. And I would argue that this is barrier number one for a lot of women, because we are so focused on pleasing other people, living up to other people's expectations, living our life for others, that we don't spend time getting to know ourselves. And so definitely that can certainly be a barrier. It's just not knowing what our values are. And then the second part of that I wanted to highlight of that definition is showing a consistent and uncompromising adherence. Consistency is required for integrity. So what the heck does it really mean to be consistent? Well, I think, unfortunately, we often think of consistency as doing the exact same thing over and over again. Monotony, boredom, no thanks. But if you actually look up the definition, Merriam-Webster says the consistency is actually harmony, regularity, a steady continuity. It's the ability to be asserted together without contradiction. The ability to be asserted together without contradiction. I love that. How would your life feel different? How would your life be different if you could organize it in a way that prevented contradiction, or if you lived it in a way that didn't promote contradiction? Well, I would assume that life would get a lot better, because contradiction feels not so great. Contradiction definitely leads to integrity pain. So here's what I want to invite you to consider. To maintain harmony in your life, your behaviors will not always look the same. Your values might stay the same, but your behaviors will not always look the same. And I would take that a step further and say that a rigid attachment to the idea that things are always supposed to look the same is really unhealthy. It doesn't lead to good things. Rigidity often robs us of our power. So let me give you a really concrete example here. I have a general sort of commitment of working out 4 days a week. And that working out is pretty intense strength training. But I'm sick. I woke up this morning with a head cold that my son so lovingly shared with me. And I took a minute this morning to check myself, to check out how I had organized my day. And I know, because I've learned this by doing it the wrong way, that I could absolutely show up to push through that intense strength training session, but it is going to actually rob me of my power, not help me to protect my power. I'm actually going to further deplete myself and cause more stress in my body by working out at the same intensity today, if I decided to do that. So what if I expanded the promise of showing up and respecting my body through movement today? What if I let that promise just shift from it has to look like intense strength training to being more flexible to what that approach might look like. Maybe on a day that I'm sick, like today, that looks like getting on the floor and just doing some gentle movement, some gentle stretching, exploring how my body wants to move. Maybe it looks like doing a little self-massage. My point is, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be, I can honor my commitment to movement today by showing up for that intense strength training session, or I can't do anything. But as I always say, the human brain loves all or nothing thinking. So what I really want you to hear in this is that self-care does not always look the same. But being dedicated to your self-care is always relevant. It's always a powerful promise. So there is consistency in the promise of self-care. And in order to maintain consistency with that promise, there has to be flexibility in exactly what that looks like each day. So the commitment to self-care is something that I can be consistent with, but what it actually looks like every single day is not. Longtime listeners, you've heard me say this so many times, that health is multidimensional, right? Yes, it's physical, but it's also mental and emotional, environmental and spiritual and relational. It's a lot of things. And ultimately, our health is improved by managing the total stress load of our life. Health is also dynamic, which means it's always changing because the stressors of your life are always changing. Your total stress load is always changing. So how do we build consistency in our practices in a way that honors the dynamic nature of life? Well, this is where I'd like to introduce that power promise. A power promise is a promise that you make to uphold a value that you have while simultaneously being flexible in what that actually looks like each day in order to maintain your power. So I want to read that one more time. A power promise is a promise that you make to uphold a value in your life while simultaneously being flexible in what that actually looks like in order to protect your power. So let me give you some really concrete examples. A regular or a common promise that you might make to yourself is something like, I'm going to eat 6 cups of vegetables every single day. The power promise sounds more like, I will respect my body by eating foods that support my well-being. Here's why the difference matters. A lot of days, eating 6 cups of vegetables might make tons of sense, and it might be consistent for a while. But there may come a point where you're experiencing some digestive distress. This is actually a very real example that was just given on one of our group coaching calls inside of Rumble and Rise. Someone came to the group coaching call and was talking about how the amount of vegetables they were eating, they were suspecting might be problematic in their digestion. So they were experiencing some digestive upset. And their intuition was telling them that, hey, maybe it's the amount of fiber that you're consuming. So forcing her way to continue to eat that much vegetable is probably not beneficial. It's going to rob her of her power. But does that mean that she can't respect her body by eating foods that support her well-being? Of course not. She can still do that, but she has to be willing to let it look different. So we talked about alternatives. We talked about maybe the way she was preparing her vegetables, that sometimes if we're eating a lot of raw vegetables, we need to cook them to help break them down before we digest them. We talked about using powders in her smoothies that have a lot of the nutrient value of vegetables minus the fiber. We even talked about the possibility of just staying away from vegetables for a while to see what she learns. So if her power promise is, I will respect my body by eating foods that support my well-being, she's going to be a lot more open to other options when her body is giving her indication that something's not working. Another example would be of a regular promise is something like, I will get 8 hours of sleep every night in an effort, right, to sort of honor my recovery. But a power promise sounds like, I will honor my body's need for restoration and adjust my life accordingly to what those needs are. So do you hear the difference, right? The regular promise is very rigid and very specific. And please do not hear that I am not a fan of specificity. I am, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But the reason knowing your power promise, the bigger value that you are upholding, is because often you are going to get yourself in trouble if the specific commitment doesn't work to protect your power that day. So instead of, I will get 8 hours of sleep every night, I remind myself that my power promise is that I'm going to honor my body's need for recovery, because guess what? Sometimes I need more than 8 hours. Sometimes I get 8 hours and I still don't feel recovered. So maybe I need to carve out some time in my day to decompress, to take a nap, to do things that kind of tap me into that parasympathetic nervous system. So again, I am not suggesting that the specificity of your daily commitments doesn't matter. It does. But what I am saying is that it is your responsibility that the commitments you are making each day are actually serving the purpose that they intended to serve. So again, going back to my strength training commitment, right? My overarching value, my power promise is that I honor my body through movement every day. But if I am so rigidly attached to the idea that that looks like heavy strength training on a day that I don't feel well, it's not actually promoting my well-being. It's costing me my well-being. So something that looks really nourishing today might actually be depleting tomorrow. Man, we hate this truth, right? Because we just want to see one pathway and that I can just decide on a behavior and that is forevermore going to nourish me. Not the case. So again, this morning, waking up with a head cold, I did not spend any time beating myself up or lamenting the fact that my body needed more rest and that I needed to recalibrate my workout plans for the day. Because I knew, because again, I've been down this road many times, that the quicker I honored what my body truly needed to get well, the sooner I will get well. So I brought my focus to my bigger promise, which is to actually do what needs to be done to be well. And today that does not look like heavy strength training. It looks like more recovery. It looks like gentle movement, lots of hydration, probably more than I usually do. So I want to simplify this by saying that power promises inform your daily commitments. And they allow you to stay the course, even though your actions to do that, to reach the goal, will not always look the same. So think about this in terms of macro and micro. Let's say macro is the power promise. It is your strong value. It is making a promise based on a value that you want to uphold in your life. And that power promise, that macro level of promise, informs the micro promises, the smaller promises that you want to make in the day. So on a micro level, we're talking about the daily choices that allow you to honor your values. What does keeping the promise of doing what needs to be done to be well look like today? Maybe it does look like heavy strength training. Maybe it does look like eating 6 cups of vegetables. But maybe, if you're being super honest, it looks like getting to bed by 8 o'clock tonight. Asking someone in your household to cook dinner so you don't have to do it. Saying no to a work project that you can do, but you have so much on your plate, it's just going to cause you more stress and upset. So what are some power promises that you might want to consider making? Well, I mean, literally, this could be anything, right? But I think it's always useful to kind of start with things that help to support your wellness. Because I always think of wellness as base camp. If you're not well, it's really hard to move your life to higher ground in any other area. So some examples, and these are just a few of thousands of examples you could come up with. I think of the power promise at the most base level as making a promise to the person, the version of myself I want most fully expressed in the world. So that might sound like, I promise to be a person who stays self-aware. I promise to be a person who stays awake to her life. That's the macro level, right? That's the power promise. In terms of daily actions, daily promises, that might look like doing some meditation today. It might look like collecting some data about how I'm showing up in an area that I'm struggling in. It might look like experimenting with organizing myself a little bit differently. So I'm not expending all of my resources in the first half of the day. So if I know that the power promise is something like, I promise to be a person who stays awake to her life, I then get to ask the question, well, what does that look like today? What does it look like to stay awake and self-aware in my life today? Well, it looks like I need to create some alone time. I need to have some time for introspection. Where's that going to happen? And then once I carve out that space, what am I actually going to do with that space? So I hope you see how the macro helps to inform the micro. Here's another example. I promise to be a person who honors her need for recovery. Because as a human being, my friends, you all have a very strong need for recovery. Your nervous system is not designed to be in hyperdrive all the time. So if I promise to be a person who honors her need for recovery, that's my power promise. What do I need to do today to honor that promise? Well, gosh, I've been really cutting myself short on sleep. I need to make a concerted effort to get myself to bed earlier. Or, gosh, I keep saying yes to all these projects and all these things that other people want me to do, that I'm feeling burnt out. I need to pull back. I need to extract myself from some of these commitments. Which is, yes, it means making some hard decisions, letting some people down. Maybe honoring your need for recovery today just looks like carving out some windows of time for decompression, to just be out in nature, take a few breaths, read an article that's been on your desk for 5 weeks. Another example, I promise to show up as a person who supports my well-being. That's the power promise. What does that look like for you today? What does it look like today to support my well-being? What does it look like today to nourish myself? Well, sure, that might look like putting more focus on choosing quality foods. It might look like feeding yourself a little more consistently throughout the day. It might look like drinking things other than coffee and soda. But it also might look like taking time to connect with others. It might look like taking responsibility for what you are absorbing through your other senses. What are you exposing yourself to? What are you listening to? What are you reading? Because all of that is a form of nourishment of sorts. And is it nourishing you? Is it helping you to become a person who honors or supports her well-being? Or is it in contradiction to that? I'm going to give you one other example. I promise to be a person who treats herself with kindness and respect. What does that look like today? Well, maybe it means no matter what happens today, I'm not giving the mean girl the microphone. Maybe it means no matter what I mess up today, I'm not going to spend time beating myself up and making myself feel terrible. Maybe it looks like taking some time to just acknowledge my own accomplishments because I've been so frustrated that no one else is validating that. So maybe that's my opportunity to do that work myself. These are just ideas. But I do challenge you today to consider what your power promises might be. And secondly, what are you doing each day to honor those promises? So don't overwhelm yourself with power promises. Pick 2 or 3. Right? So when we think about our strong values that we want to uphold, most people have like maybe 3 to 5 values. So consider what power promises you might want to make in dedication to your values and use it as a filter for how you organize your day. And be willing to be flexible in what that looks like. So staying consistent actually demands that we stay open to the fact that the details of our daily life will not always look the same. And having grace with that. It's not a bad thing. It's life. So we're going to be talking a lot more about this in the Consistency Code Crash Course. If this kind of piqued your interest, if something landed, again, that course, it starts on October 24th. Registration opens on October 5th, which is just in a few days. And you can find out all the details on October 5th and register by going to graceandgrit.com/crash course. I hope I'll see you there. I definitely will see you next week. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story. And it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort. And with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.